The week of November 24th began like any other in Los Angeles, bathed in sunlight that made the Forrester Creations building gleam like a temple of beauty and ambition. Yet beneath its polished exterior, the air carried a strange unease. Electra Forrester could feel it before she even understood why. Something about the morning felt heavy, a quiet tension humming beneath the usual chatter of designers and assistants. By noon, that tension took form. Dylan had returned. Her presence at Forrester Creations, after so many months of silence, was unexpected enough to draw attention from even the most focused employees. But it was her expression, haunted, pale, trembling, that silenced the entire design floor when she asked to see Electra privately. Electra recognized her immediately. The young art teacher who had once guided Hayes Finnegan through paintbrushes and imagination, who had seemed gentle and harmless, now looked like a ghost carrying a burden too large for her frail frame. The sight triggered something unsettling in Electra's chest. Memories of Hayes's cheerful laughter during those art lessons mingled with darker recollections. Luna's accident, the child that would never be born, the grief that had reshaped every corner of her world. Electra had worked hard to reclaim a sense of balance after the tragedy, but Dylan's sudden reappearance threatened to unravel it all. The room they entered was still, filled only with the quiet hum of the city outside. Dylan hesitated before speaking, her fingers twisting nervously. Electra watched her, wary but curious, sensing that whatever the young woman was about to reveal was not just an apology or a reunion, it was a confession. When Dylan finally met her eyes, her voice came out as a whisper, trembling under the weight of unspoken guilt. She said she had come to tell the truth, something she should have done long ago. For a fleeting moment, Electra wondered if this was about Luna. Her mind drifted back to that night, the flashing police lights, the endless questions, the unbearable silence that followed. Luna's death had become the kind of wound that healed without closing, a scar etched into the lives of everyone connected to her. Well, Spencer had been the most affected. His pain wasn't for Luna herself, but for the unborn child that died with her. He had only begun to imagine fatherhood when fate ripped that fragile possibility away. Bill and Katie had planned to raise the baby as their own, but Will's quiet grief never subsided. Losing that child had changed him in ways no one fully understood. And though Electra tried to be strong, every time she saw Will's distant stare, she felt the same hollow ache. When Dylan began to speak, the truth unfolded slowly, like a confession dragged from a dream. She admitted that she had been on the coastal road the night Luna died. Her voice cracked when she said the words, her body trembling as if the memory itself burned. She described the rain-slick asphalt, the flash of headlights, the sudden blur of a figure appearing out of nowhere. She hadn't meant to hit anyone. It had been an accident. But when she realized who it was, Luna, she panicked. Fear and shock overwhelmed her, and instead of calling for help, she drove away. She convinced herself that someone else would find Luna, that it wasn't her responsibility. But guilt had devoured her ever since. Electra felt the ground shift beneath her. For months, the world had been searching for answers, blaming fate or recklessness, or perhaps divine punishment. And now the truth sat right in front of her, fragile, remorseful, and human. Dylan's confession didn't bring the relief one might expect. Instead, it unleashed a torrent of confusion, rage, pity, and despair. She wanted to scream at Dylan, to call her a murderer, to demand why she hadn't stayed, why she hadn't called for help, why Luna and the child had to die alone. But as she looked into Dylan's tearful eyes, she saw not malice, but torment, the kind of torment that consumed a soul from within until there was nothing left but regret. Still, Electra couldn't contain her fury. Her hands trembled, her voice sharp as glass as she reminded Dylan of what she had taken, not just a life, but an entire future. Luna had been flawed, complicated, and often destructive, but she had been alive, vibrant, pregnant, and fighting for redemption. Her death had left Will broken, Bill and Katie devastated, and Electra herself torn between love and guilt. To learn that it had been avoidable, That one act of cowardice had cost them everything, felt unbearable. Yet even as she spoke, she realized the futility of her anger. Nothing could bring Luna back. Nothing could undo the silence that followed her last breath. Dylan didn't defend herself. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She simply confessed, her voice hollow with self-condemnation. She said she hadn't come for sympathy or absolution, only to tell the truth before it destroyed her completely. Every night she dreamed of Luna standing in the road, the headlights illuminating her shocked face, her eyes wide with fear and accusation. Dylan had tried to erase those images, but they always returned, sharper, crueler. She hadn't just killed a woman. She had killed the person she might have been, the one who cared for children, who loved art, who believed in kindness. The air between them grew suffocating. Electra stood frozen, torn between hatred and sorrow, between the instinct to lash out and the impossible pull of compassion. Her heart pounded as she thought of Will, who still talked to the wind as if speaking to the child he lost. How could she tell him this? How could she carry another secret when their fragile happiness depended on silence? Outside, Los Angeles continued its indifferent rhythm, the city of angels bearing witness to yet another fallen soul. Inside Forrester Creations, two women sat facing each other across the chasm of a shared tragedy, one consumed by guilt, the other by the unbearable burden of knowing. Dylan wept quietly, while Electra stared at the floor, trying to reconcile this confession with the image of the gentle teacher she once trusted. When Dylan finally left, Electra remained motionless for a long time. The office, once filled with the scent of perfume and the hum of creation, now felt like a tomb. Every color around her seemed muted, every reflection a reminder of loss. She thought of Luna's defiance, her fiery spirit, the way she refused to be defined by anyone's expectations. And now, her story ended not with redemption or justice, but with a confession whispered too late. Later that night, Electra found Will sitting alone by the ocean. The waves crashed relentlessly, as if echoing the chaos in her chest. She wanted to tell him the truth, but as she looked at his face, tired, haunted, fragile, she couldn't. He was finally beginning to heal, to smile without pain. Telling him would destroy that progress. So she stayed silent, watching the horizon, her heart heavy with secrets. Days passed, but Dylan's confession echoed in Electra's mind. Every meeting, every phone call, every moment of quiet became a reminder. She began to see guilt everywhere, in the way Bill avoided talking about the accident, in the way Katie looked at old photographs, in the way Will's laughter faltered when someone mentioned the future. Everyone was trying to move on, but the past clung to them like a shadow. When Dylan turned herself in to the police a week later, the news broke across the city. The revelation shocked everyone. Headlines screamed about the teacher who killed Luna Nozawa, the daughter of a powerful family, the woman whose death had already divided Los Angeles. Public sympathy was split. Some saw Dylan as a monster, others as a tragic figure crushed by guilt. Electra avoided the media entirely. She couldn't bear to watch the world dissect the pain she already lived with. Steffi Forrester's reaction, however, was colder. She saw Dylan's arrest as closure, another chapter in the endless cycle of scandal that surrounded the Forresters. But for Finn, who had once trusted Dylan with his son, it was unbearable. He saw in her confession a reflection of his own failures, the inability to protect those he cared about, the cost of indifference. As the trial loomed, Electra found herself summoned as a witness. Her testimony could decide Dylan's fate. She spent sleepless nights reliving their conversation, wondering if she should defend the woman who had destroyed her peace. In the courtroom, when Dylan's eyes met hers, Electra saw something unexpected, not desperation, but relief. It was as if the burden of truth, once shared, had set Dylan free even as it condemned her. The verdict came swiftly: manslaughter, probation, and community service. Some called it mercy, others called it injustice. But for Electra, it was something else entirely: a reckoning. She realized that forgiveness was not an act of moral superiority, but of survival. Carrying hatred would only bind her to Luna's death forever. In the months that followed, Dylan disappeared from the public eye, dedicating herself to charity work, teaching art to children whose lives had been touched by tragedy. Electra visited her once, unannounced. She found her painting by the beach, the same stretch of road where everything had ended. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to. The silence between them said enough, that pain, when faced, could become something else. Not peace, perhaps, but understanding. We'll eventually learn the truth, not from Electra, but from a news article. At first, he was furious, not only at Dylan but at Electra for keeping it from him. Yet when he saw her tears, his anger softened. He realized that everyone in the story had been broken in their own way, trying to protect what little they had left. In the end, Luna's death became more than a tragedy. It became a mirror reflecting the fragility of every human heart involved. Dylan found redemption through confession, Electra found strength through compassion, and Will learned that grief, though cruel, could lead to clarity. The world of the bold and the beautiful moved on, as it always did, but the scars remained, invisible yet enduring. And as the sun set over Los Angeles, painting the sky in shades of gold and sorrow, Electra finally whispered the words she had held inside for so long, a farewell not just to Luna, but to the guilt that had kept her prisoner. Because in the end, the truth, however painful, was the only thing that could set them free. The lights of Los Angeles shimmered with their usual holiday glow, but for Sheila Carter, the world had lost all color. What should have been a season of celebration now felt like a cruel reminder of everything she had lost. Luna Nozawa was gone, and with her death, something in Sheila's hardened heart had finally cracked. For all her flaws, all her crimes, she had loved that girl with a purity that few would ever believe. In Luna's laughter, Sheila had glimpsed a chance for redemption, a chance to see innocence survive in a world that had long since labeled her a monster. Now, standing in the quiet of her living room, she felt only the echo of absence. The air was thick with grief, and Deacon's sharp silence beside her was a deeper wound than she dared admit. Deacon had once promised her forever, though both of them knew that forever was a fragile word in their world. When they found their way back to each other after years of chaos, Sheila believed it was fate, that their mutual darkness had finally found peace in the same flame. She convinced herself that his touch meant forgiveness, that his eyes still saw her as more than the sum of her sins. But lately, even before Luna's death, Deacon had grown distant. He had become quiet, evasive, spending long nights, working late, and avoiding her gaze. At first, she dismissed it as stress, but now, in the aftermath of tragedy, that distance had become unbearable. Every time she reached for him, he flinched. Every time she tried to speak of Luna, his expression hardened, as though grief were something he couldn't afford to share with her. Sheila could sense that his heart was elsewhere, and she feared she knew exactly where. Dr. Taylor Hayes. The name alone made Sheila's blood run cold. Taylor, with her calm voice and spotless reputation, the woman who had once claimed to heal others while secretly nurturing her own brokenness. To Sheila, Taylor represented everything she despised and envied, the perfect woman who could make even the most flawed man believe he was being redeemed by loving her. And now, that woman had found her way back into Deacon's orbit. The whispers, the late-night calls, the lingering scent of unfamiliar perfume on his collar, all of it painted a picture Sheila could no longer ignore. Yet, what hurt her most was not Deacon's betrayal, it was the timing. Luna's death had left her hollow, desperate for a connection, for someone to hold her when the nightmares came. But instead of offering comfort, Deacon drifted further away, retreating into silence that cut deeper than any insult. He didn't cry with her, didn't rage, didn't even pretend to share her sorrow. Instead, he acted like Luna's death was a tragic inconvenience, a headline to be endured rather than mourned. His kindness, once her lifeline, had become a mask. Beneath it, Sheila sensed resentment, and perhaps relief. Because Luna, for all her charm and youth, had been a reminder of everything Deacon feared. Her wild spirit, her rebellious streak, her refusal to conform, they mirrored the parts of Sheila he wished to forget. Luna's death, in a twisted way, freed him from confronting his own complicity. He could now pretend that the past was sealed, that he could move forward without the constant reminder of the Carter bloodline pulsing through someone innocent. And that realization turned Sheila's grief into rage. She began watching him more closely, noticing how often his phone lit up with messages he wouldn't read in front of her. When she asked who it was, he would shrug and mumble about business or friends. But Sheila knew better. Her instincts had kept her alive through decades of betrayal. They never lied. The man she loved, the man who had once looked at her with defiance and desire, was slipping through her fingers and into the arms of another woman. Deacon, meanwhile, was fighting his own private war. On the surface, he was the loyal husband standing by a grieving wife, but inside, guilt and revulsion tore him apart. Every moment spent with Sheila now felt like a penance. Her tears, her trembling hands, her whispered pleas for comfort, they no longer moved him. He told himself it was because of exhaustion, but deep down, he knew the truth. He couldn't love her anymore. Somewhere between Luna's death and the suffocating weight of their shared history, his affection had curdled into obligation. He had tried to leave before, but guilt had always pulled him back. This time, though, something had changed. Taylor Hayes. Her name echoed in his thoughts like a forbidden prayer. He had sought her out initially for therapy, desperate to silence the voices of regret that haunted him. But Taylor's calm presence, her empathy, her refusal to judge him, it all became intoxicating. She didn't see him as the failed con man or the husband trapped in a toxic marriage. She saw him as a man still capable of decency. And that, more than anything, terrified him. Because with Taylor, Deacon began to imagine a different kind of life, a life without guilt, without chaos, without the constant need to justify his choices. He tried to fight it. He told himself he owed Sheila his loyalty, that she had stood by him when no one else would. But loyalty without love is its own kind of cruelty, and every time he looked into Sheila's tear-streaked face, he felt the unbearable weight of dishonesty. He wanted to be her savior, but she had become his prison. And when he held Taylor's hand one evening after a particularly emotional session, the warmth he felt was not that of temptation, it was release. Sheila noticed the shift immediately. One evening, as he prepared to leave, she blocked the door, her eyes blazing with a mix of fear and fury. "Where are you going?" she demanded, her voice trembling between accusation and desperation. Deacon froze, torn between compassion and irritation. He muttered something about clearing his head, but the lie hung heavy in the air. Sheila's gaze followed him as he left, her intuition confirming what her heart already knew. He was running toward someone else. The next days unfolded like a slow disintegration. Sheila oscillated between pleading and threatening, between vulnerability and violence. She tried to remind him of their shared past, the nights they fought the world together, the promises whispered in the dark, but he remained distant. Her grief over Luna morphed into obsession, not just with Deacon's betrayal but with the growing certainty that Taylor was the thief of her final chance at happiness. Meanwhile, Deacon's guilt deepened. He told himself he wasn't cheating, at least not physically, but the emotional intimacy with Taylor was undeniable. She became the voice he turned to in moments of confusion, the presence he sought when Sheila's madness suffocated him. Taylor warned him to be honest, to end things cleanly before they destroyed each other, but he hesitated. He feared what Sheila might do if he left her now, especially in her fragile state. The guilt twisted him into silence, and that silence became its own betrayal. Then came the confrontation. It was inevitable. Sheila found the messages, the carefully worded exchanges with Taylor, the emotional confessions disguised as therapeutic dialogue. Her fury erupted like a storm. She accused him of lying, of sneaking behind her back, while she mourned her granddaughter. Deacon didn't deny it. For the first time, he couldn't lie. The words poured out, raw and unfiltered. He told her he couldn't live like this anymore, that their marriage was built on fear, not love, that he needed to breathe again. Sheila's face crumpled, her fury dissolving into disbelief. "You're leaving me for her?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Deacon hesitated, but his silence was answer enough. In that moment, Sheila understood the final cruelty of fate. She had spent her entire life fighting to be loved, to be seen as something more than the monster the world believed her to be. And just when she thought she had found that love, it slipped away, stolen by someone who would always be everything she was not: pure, calm, respectable. The irony was unbearable. The pain, indescribable. In the days that followed, Sheila retreated into isolation. Her grief over Luna fused with the agony of Deacon's betrayal until she could no longer tell them apart. The woman who once defied death now sat in silence, surrounded by the ghosts of her past. She replayed every conversation, every smile, every touch, searching for the moment when love had turned to pity. She wondered if Deacon ever truly loved her, or if she had simply been another broken soul he tried to fix. Deacon, meanwhile, tried to move forward, but the guilt never left him. Even as he found comfort in Taylor's company, he couldn't escape the shadow of what he had done. Every time he looked at her, he saw Luna's face, Sheila's tears, the wreckage of a family he had helped destroy. Taylor understood his turmoil, but she couldn't absolve him. Love, she told him, was never meant to be born out of someone else's despair. As Christmas approached, Sheila made one last attempt to reach out. She sent Deacon a note, just a few words written in trembling handwriting. "You are my peace in a world that hated me. Don't let them take that from you, too." He read it alone in the quiet of his apartment, tears welling in his eyes. For all her madness, Sheila had loved him fiercely, completely. And part of him knew that no one, not even Taylor, would ever love him that way again. In the end, Sheila's pain became her redemption. She didn't lash out. She didn't seek revenge.